You want me to prove it, yes? Looking for a dog, yes? Great dog, that's your brilliant theory. Cherchez le chien. Good, excellent. Yes, where should we start? How about them? The sentimental widow and her son, the unemployed fisherman. The answer's yes.
Yes?
She's got a West Highland Terrier called Whiskey. Not exactly what we're looking for.
Sherlock, for God's sake.
Look at the jumper he's wearing. Hardly worn. Clearly he's uncomfortable in it. Maybe it's because of the material. More likely the hideous pattern suggests it's a present, probably Christmas. So he wants into his mother's good books. Why? Almost certainly money. He's treating her to a meal, but his own portion is small. That means he wants to impress her, but he's trying to economize on his own food.
Well, maybe he's just not hungry.
No, small plate, starter. He's practically licked it clean. She's nearly finished her pavlova. If she treated him, he'd have as much as he wanted. He's hungry, all right, and not well off. You can tell that by the state of his cuffs and shoes. How do you know she's his mother? Who else would give him a Christmas present like that? Well, it could be an aunt or an older sister, but mother's more likely. Now, he was a fisherman. Scarring pattern on his hands, very distinctive. Fish hooks. They're all quite old now. It suggests he's been unemployed for some time. Not much industry in this part of the world, so he's turned to his widowed mother for help. Widowed? Yes, obviously. She's got a man's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Clearly her late husband's too big for her finger. She's well dressed, but her jewelry's cheap. She could afford better, but she's kept it. Sentimental. Now, the dog. Tiny little hairs all over the leg from where it gets a little bit too friendly. But no hairs above the knees, suggesting it's a small dog. Probably a terrier. In fact, it is a West Highland Terrier called Whiskey. How the hell do you know that, Sherlock? Because she was on the same train as us and I heard her calling its name, and that's not cheating. That's listening. I use my senses, John, unlike some people. So you see, I am fine. In fact, I've never been better. So just leave me alone.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, why would you listen to me? I'm just your friend.
I don't have friends.
Nah. Wonder why.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com and this is my good friend and co-host Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
We are wrapping up. It's a holiday weekend here in the United States. It's Memorial Day where we remember people who gave their lives in service to their countries, and we're a little late, but we are wrapping up Mysteries in May, which has been so much fun. First time, we've had some really exciting movies that we've talked about and fun stories that we've shared here. We're going to wrap it up with a real humdinger. But if you are brand new, maybe you're a big fan of Mr. Holmes and you've just stumbled on us for that reason. This is a podcast where we talk about movies that have been adapted. We say book, but really we mean any literary source. It could be a magazine article. It could be a short story, a novella, a play, a song, a poem. As long as it has a literary source, as long as the source material, the book, quote unquote book, and or movie are readily available, streaming online, we can get ourselves, we don't have to pay $80 on eBay to get a copy of it. We are delighted to cover it, but we are always looking for suggestions. There are many places where you can make those suggestions, interact with us, meet other listeners of this podcast, and enjoy our little book club of the year here.
We have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it because the episodes are always posted there, but we're much more interactive in our private Facebook group. You type in Book VS Movie Podcast Group and ask to join. And we just talk about books and movies there and old-timey movies and suggestions that people have. And we just ask that the movie be streaming on a major platform. On Instagram and Threads, we are at Book versus and Movies. It's also on Twitter, so you can send your suggestions there. And we have an old-timey email, bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, send us your address and we will drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help us keep the lights on around here, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. We have about over 150 episodes there. We've been doing the show for 10 years. And recently we put up their Love Story, Being There, Benjamin Button's Arrival, Streetcar Named Desire, and To Sir with Love. Those are just the most recent ones. And it just helps with the costs of the show, getting the books and the movies, and also just paying for all the things we need to put this show together. And we thank all of you that support us there. But if you want to find another way to support us, please like wherever you are, whatever podcast app you use. If you could please subscribe, but also just leave us some stars or a comment or whatever, that would be amazing. Or just tell a friend about the show, frankly.
Whenever you list up the things that you've just put up on our Patreon, there's always at least one or two that I think, oh, I forgot we did that.
Yeah.
I totally forgot. Yeah. I forgot that we did a couple of those, Streetcar and Love Story. And what was the last one you said?
To Sir with Love.
Yeah, I totally forgot with Lulu and Sidney Poitier.
Yes.
And yeah, completely forgot. I remember that I read that, and I remember that that we watched. I remember the movie. I just forgot that was related to this podcast. Such as it is. Okay, so look, I feel like we have to. This is one of these again, just like we had when we talked about Agatha Christie at the beginning of the month. So we started with Agatha Christie. We are wrapping up with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And I'm sure I'm forgetting Agatha Christie's title. Dame? Is she Dame?
Yes.
I forget. We are not scholars of either of these writers or of English literature or film. Either. just so you know. We just like talking about these things. And so there's going to be like a whole bunch we're going to miss. We said last week, like this book in particular is one that students in the United States are off, like when we are studying English literature, they kind of throw this one in to make it exciting for the kids. So if you are one of those kids and you're listening as part of your book report, like don't cite us or, this is not the place to go for info for your book report. Do kids even do book reports anymore? I don't even know.
Let us know. Yes.
I don't know. I feel like my son did one recently. Anyway, so all of this is to say, like, we're going to miss a lot of stuff. There, especially with our author, a very rich life, can we say. We will just be hitting the broad strokes, but we are very excited if you are brand new to, maybe you're brand new to Dr. Watson and Mr. Sherlock Holmes. So this will be a fun, little combo in that regard, but please don't at us with you like, well, actually, Sir Arthur, it's fine. We're just two ladies meeting to talk about a book we read and a movie we watched. You could join us or not. It's fine. So let's talk about this extraordinary gentleman, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yes, Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle was born May 22nd, 1859. He is from Edinburgh, Scotland. He grew up very poor, and his father was an alcoholic, and there was all kinds of drama going on in his family. He was educated with Jesuits, people that he wound up having a problem with, but he was very intelligent. He did go on to medical school. He became an ophthalmologist and tried his to find his career there, opened up a place in London and couldn't find enough patients, but he always liked to write. And he just started writing murder mysteries, and he started getting published, and he created this character of Sherlock Holmes. And they were serialized in magazine. The Strand magazine in particular was one that took an interest in him and supported him. And almost right away, he was a success, and people followed him. They loved Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Sherlock Holmes is a man that's very logical and can notice everything. Just looking at a person can tell everything about them. They solve crimes. It's very gothic. It's really interesting, and people loved this character. And then he basically became tired of writing him, and so he killed off Sherlock Holmes in 1893, which he had his character fall off by a waterfall with Mortieri. Is that his enemy? But he Moriarty, yeah. Professor Moriarty, in the Reichenbach Falls, and that was called The Final Problem. The public kind of lost their minds, so in 1901, he started writing, and they wrote him letters, and he made like a lot of money, and people were just completely looking forward to every new Sherlock Holmes tale. And so this is his first novel as Sherlock Holmes coming back as a character. We should say the man was very, very interesting. He was interested in spiritualism. He had a close friendship with Harry Houdini. And when Houdini went about Houdini, the last like 10 years of his life, was exposing seances and clairvoyance and people who claimed to connect with the dead. And
it was a big cultural phenomenon at the time. People, it was after the Civil War in the United States. There were, the flu epidemic, pandemic, I should say, World War One. There was a lot of death, and then just like your general, mortality that happened. So spiritualism and this school of thought of that being able to communicate with the dead. As you can imagine, a lot of people took advantage of a lot of other people, and many, many people that we've talked about on this podcast fully bought into it and followed it for all of their lives. Harry Houdini, if I remember correctly, after his mother died, basically Harry Houdini wanted to find somebody who actually genuinely could help him communicate with his mother who had passed. When he went looking for such a thing, and so he made it his mission. He kind of put aside his career, sort of, or used his career to fund his mission of debunking and exposing these frauds, which is so interesting to me because he, we talk about, especially right now where we're, it's a very divisive ideological era that we are in currently. Similarly, he was just bound and determined, like no matter how much sleep he lost or how many miles he had to travel, he was going to expose these spiritualists for the frauds that they were. And yet his very good friend, who has a character who does nothing but rely on facts and logic and what he can actually see. And famously in this story, totally, is not even for a moment entertaining the fact of the supernatural. His creator believes in fairies and spirits and
right. There was a movie that came out a little while ago, and it was there were these fairy pictures, and this is like when photography was pretty new as a hobby.
It was a new science and hobby, yes.
Right, and it turns out these little girls in England, these youngs, they were like under 10, and they took these photos, and then their father developed it for them, but they made these photos and said, look, they're fairies. Fairies are real. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was like, yep, I believe that. And he had a friend of his that went to the house and they reproduced it, and they had to get the two sisters back. The other sister was away at college. They had to bring her back, or school, bring her back. And they set something up and he was absolutely convinced. And the girls later, one of the sisters admitted that it was, well, of course it's a fraud. I mean, it's not, it's just.
I mean, just if you look at you guys look them up, look up the fairy photos. It's basically like they drew little fairies, put them on popsicle sticks, post them in the photos. Like they couldn't look more fake.
But Photoshop.
The creator of Sherlock Holmes is like, all in.
Yes. It's so incongruous to what we think of him. And maybe that's why he stopped wanting to write the character, because he had more supernatural notions about him. He's, for all accounts, was a good friend, a family man. His first wife passed away, and then his second wife, there's some overlap there, but she was very, very sick, and his first wife was very sick towards the end, but he had a lot of kids. He traveled the world. He brought his kids with him. Very, very famous. He became a sir. He lived to be 70, and a very, very interesting man. And as we said, there are people, as we've said before, people who spend their entire academic careers on this, much less people who spend their actual careers, like running the museums, keeping the name going, keeping the history going.
Yes.
And so we're all respectful of all of that. So please understand, we're like taking a very high point of view, looking down. But this was really fast. And I forgot all about the fairies and stuff like that. I was checking out YouTube this morning. I'm like, oh, that's right. He was all in.
He really was, but he was a brilliant man. I mean,
yes.
he was also a scholar of architecture. I mean, just really, really interesting guy. And from a very unlikely, beginning, he really had a very difficult childhood. He really was he and his mother, did he have siblings? I can't
Yeah.
remember all of a sudden. But anyway, they were left absolutely. First of all, they had a very difficult time when his father was alive. His father was an abusive alcoholic, and then his father dies, and they are completely left just out in the wind. And some, as far as I can tell, they were strangers. Really, I mean, they weren't family members.
Mm-hmm.
Take him in and set him on this path of getting an education, and I don't know, how all his other interests kind of, he meets Dr. Bell, who's one of the inspirations for Sherlock Holmes. There's all it's very unlikely, how his life kind of unfolded, and yet here we have this really interesting character who has influenced every single mystery character, sleuth, detective, police procedural that we've ever seen, television shows, movies.
Just the name
how,
Sherlock. When you say Sherlock, people, as a, if you're
Yes.
making fun of someone or whatever, it's like, no bleep Sherlock. I mean,
Yes, which is always what I hear in my mind when I watch that television show, which we're going to talk about today. When I watch the television series and it goes da 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 da, that's what I hear, is that expression over the music. And now you will never be able to unhear it. So anyway,
there were so many adaptations that we were considering, and we had asked our Facebook group, and everybody has their favorite Sherlock, and we decided to try to kind of go most recent that we felt,
Mm-hmm.
and we both are big Benedict Cumberbatch fans. We both have the Brit box, so we were like, well, we should be covering this one. So that's what we decided to do.
Yes, I mean, I love all of them. I love Jeremy Brett. Is it Nigel Hawthorne? And I mean, they're all good. I think that I will say that, like, for the most part, the people who have taken these stories and adapted them for stage and screen and, big screen and small screen are very lovingly protective of this character. And they really always seem to have been very considered about who they choose. And Dr. Watson as well. Like, you have to have a good Watson. We often listen to the radio serials of them. They're very, very good. Anyway, so much fun. Let's talk about this series, though, that was created by Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat. Was it I'm trying to think, when was it started?
2010, I believe.
2010. Okay. I mean, another brilliant mind or set of minds, and very smart to update it for a 21st century post-internet. Sherlock Holmes, the thing about Sherlock Holmes is that he's using his own brain and the powers of deduction in an era of science. Yes, there were a lot of scientific advantages that or scientific advances that came about during this era. But then the decision, we say, well, what about if we have the internet? What about if we have small smartphones? So we'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about the broad strokes of the Hound, the story of the Hound. And one of the things that I thought was really cool about this book is that, of course, it was published, as many things that we've talked about from this era, it was published as a serial in a magazine. Mm-hmm. So there are many cliffhangers. It's very telenovela in a lot of ways. There's a lot of like moment. And I always imagine, like, then you had to just wait. You get to this big cliffhanger you just got to wait around to the next to find out what happened. Wow.
Yeah.
And everybody's like talking about it and speculating about, their theories of the plot. And so it's kind of, I found the plot to be kind of complicated.
Thank you.
But again, I'm trying to, right?
Yes.
But also, I was trying, as I was reading it, because it does get, when you're reading it all in one go, like we just did, it does get very complicated and thorny. But if I'm reading it spaced out chapter by chapter over, several months, where I have time to think about all of these little subplots and tertiary characters and whatnot, and what they might mean, and I have time to think about every little thing that they say and every little detail that Sherlock notices, and it's a different experience that we don't have anymore.
It's I was thinking about this. I was talking about The Sopranos with somebody, and watching that every week, for about a few months, and then waiting a year for them.
And then
to
you
pick
had
up
all
again.
that time to talk about it.
Right. When I had a friend who watched them all during COVID, and then I would bring up, well, about Big Pussy, or what about this character? And she was like, wait, who? And I was like, no, these are, big characters. I mean, but when you take it all in at once, there's so much going on in that universe. It's very hard to keep it straight.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And then there's a lot going on here. So I'm glad you feel that way too. I mean, I listened to it. I had it on audiobook, plus I read it.
I did too. I did both. Yes, same.
And easy to get.
Because that's another fun thing. Easy to find. It's just for free. You could get your hands on it and your ears on it real simply. They are stories that are fun to hear out loud. But also when you're reading, I find when I'm reading the actual book, it's easier to pick up on clues. I have an easier time picking up on the clues when I'm reading it than when I'm listening to it. Because when I'm listening to it, I get all caught up in the characters of Holmes and Watson and what's their deal. And, so I personally kind of need both to really get the whole experience. But, so yes, I also listened and read. And also because I did get I started to lose it a little bit with all the characters and things happening. To us, it seems like they're happening quickly, but to the original audience, it would not have seemed that way. So I appreciate that. And I remember reading this. I must have read it in high school.
I think we read The Murders of the Rue Morgue. I think that was our. Oh no, that's that. Or is that Edgar Allan Poe?
I'm not remembering all of a sudden.
Once again,
there's a lot of Sherlock Holmes stories here. This is where our non-scholarship is going to be exposed, because there's a lot of short stories. It's like how many?
Oh, dozens.
Let me look.
Okay, Murders in the Rue Morgue is actually Edgar Allan Poe. So yes, this is the one, because we did read that one for sure. So sorry.
Okay, here we go. 4 novels. This is just for Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. 4 novels, of which this is one, and 56 short stories, y'all. Like, that's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And he tried to get out of it. He killed him off.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of science fiction. But he made so much money, and he would, every time he would raise his prices, basically, they met it. Like, and he would ask for an outlandish sum, what he thought was.
Yeah, they were like, okay.
Fine. Is that what it takes? Because, okay. All right. So enough. Let's get to let's try to figure out this plot. It takes place in 1889.
Okay.
Dr. James
Mortimer. They're approached by a man named Dr. James Mortimer, whose friend, he's traveled to London to get a contract with Sherlock Holmes to investigate the death of his friend, Sir Charles Baskerville, right, is the dad. Mm-hmm. He tells him that the Baskervilles have this ancient supposed curse about this supernatural hound that they meet an untimely death under suspicious circumstances related to some kind of big scary dog.
Well, it's it's Hugo Baskerville.
And
Hugo Baskerville
Hugo Baskerville is the father.
Yeah, he kidnapped.
He's the originator of the curse. He had to deal with the devil.
Right. He kidnapped a neighbor's daughter, and she escaped. So he made a deal with the devil. If you get me this girl, I get whatever. But he said he had her killed by a demonic hound, is how they describe it. And it's been haunting Dartmoor, which is where he's based. And all of the heirs of his have had crazy deaths.
Weird,
like very
crazy, strange, unusual,
way before their time, even for 1899. So it's so they have this curse. And so he's saying like, hey, my friend just died and it's this curse and somebody else is trying to inherit the money from him. Can you help me figure out, was he killed by a hound? Is that what really happened? And Sherlock.
Yeah. He was found like he seemed to have died from fear.
Right. They thought it was a heart attack, but he had like a face that was showing shock.
Yeah. And there were giant paw prints.
Yes.
In the vicinity. Sir Charles is a descendant of Sir Hugo, the guy that deal with the devil guy. And that's like a couple hundred years before. That's how much time between the actual curse and the, so lots of time for village chatter. But it's still, the guy is like, he's a doctor, right? He's Dr. Mortimer.
Mm-hmm.
So he thinks, he's a man of science. He's like, really, Hound? I can't. I mean, I know the footprints are there, but really though, can you help me out? So they go to Dartmoor,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very picturesque part of the UK. And Conan Doyle does a beautiful job of describing the eeriness of the moor, the gothic shadows and mists, and it's very fun to read. You're living in London. It's smoky. It's
Right.
industrial, and now we're in a setting that's romantic and very Wuthering Heights kind of, and it's cool. So Sir Charles has two brothers. Sir Charles, who has died, it's the death we're investigating. He has two brothers, both who are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
The younger one was the bad guy, the bad one.
Yes.
He fled to Central America and died of yellow fever.
Right.
Other brother died, I forget how, and now the other brother's son is Sir Henry. He's the heir, who has just arrived. Everybody like freaking out about a giant hound, and is his life in danger? We don't know. So Holmes, again, is a man of science and a man of facts and a man of, evidence. He's not going to get swept up in a demonic hound story. So he's looking for clues. He's got Watson there. There's a lot of he gives Watson a lot to do in this particular story. If you're familiar with Sherlock Holmes, he sends Watson off with Sir Henry to kind of investigate the village and see what the lowdown is in the village. And there's a lot of there's at one point there's a person who is posing as Sherlock Holmes who's going around the village. There's so many characters, y'all. There's the couple who are the kind of caretaker couple of Baskerville Hall. Is that what it's called?
Baskerville Hall.
Baskerville Hall, which is the mansion that Sir Henry is inheriting and all the land. And the Barrymores are the caretaker. They've taken care of this place for many, many, many years. And the nature of Sir Charles's death was so sad. They say that they cannot stay there anymore. It's just too sad. So they're going to leave. They're prepping to leave, but they've been there for a long time, and they're acting a little suspiciously. We don't really know what's up with the Barrymores. There shows up this brother and sister called the Stapletons. They show up in town. They're new. They're like, oh, hey, this seems like a great place to live. And the sister, Henry Baskerville, the heir to Baskerville Hall, kind of takes a shine to the sister, and she kind of seems to take a shine to him. So we have this little romance that's going on throughout the story. They're getting closer and closer, and at one point the brother kind of swoops in on them. They're just like, he puts his arm around her shoulder or arm around her, he barely touches her, and the brother swoops in out of nowhere and starts to beat the crap out of Sir Henry, and the sister's freaking out. So there's all kinds of things, all kinds of going on in this village where they're, that they're trying to investigate this murder.
And isn't there an escaped prisoner? There's an escaped.
Yes. So then as it's going on, then there's an escaped prisoner who's a lunatic, who's raving, and he's wandering the moors at night, and nobody knows where he is, or he could come out at any time. Is he the murderer of, so people reading this would have had weeks and weeks to speculate about each of these people that for us reading it in the 21st century are all crammed into an hour's time. Somebody else.
It reminds me of, like you said, telenovela. It's like General Hospital. Nothing happens in a week, but everything
very
does.
that.
Yes.
So many characters, as you will have in a serial, because a lot of time has passed between each chapter, and maybe the audience missed the last chapter. There's a lot of why Sir Henry? oh, I met with your uncle who was in such and such, tell me again about your uncle who died under mysterious circumstances in South America. Tell me that story again. And Sir Henry will tell the story again. So there's and you're reading it now going like, why are we going over this again? Like, we already heard this part. Why are we know who she is. She's his sister, Stapleton's sister. Why are we talking about as if we're just meeting her? Because when you're writing for a serial, it's different than when you're writing for a novel.
Mm-hmm.
And Franklin has a daughter named Laura. Anyway, it's a lot. It's a lot. So it's a lot of chasing, a lot of red herrings. Eventually, we learn escaped prisoner is the son. Spoiler alert. We're going to spoil absolutely everything. You probably read The Hound of the Baskervilles, especially if you're listening in the United States. Spoiler alert, the escaped prisoner turns out to be the son of the Barrymores. And they have been signaling to him. He's been living out in the moor, in the woods and whatnot. And they have been signaling to him with like a light or something. They turning, like a signal with a lantern, turning it on and off. So to find out where he is, and also to let him know that they're going to bring him food. So they're feeding their escaped prisoner son, who is dangerous.
But they love him. That's their son.
But they love him. That's their son. And so, part of the reason why they're leaving is because they don't want to endanger, they don't want to endanger these people that they've lived with all their lives. And then Stapleton and the sister, who is getting close with Sir Henry, we learn that they are not actually brother and sister. They're actually husband and wife. And that Stapleton is really unstapled. He is extremely abusive. So she's not it's not a happy marriage. She's not really in on like, hey, let's try and fleece our way into this. She's being coerced by her very dangerous husband into this whole scheme to lure Sir Henry. And then meanwhile, we've got this supposed hound that's running around. So I'm trying to remember now what the solution of the whole mystery is.
Well, so it is
there's a whole thing about the boots.
Yeah.
Remember, there's about boots going missing. It's all down to Stapleton.
Yes.
Right? Stapleton is murderer. Okay, so Stapleton is also a Baskerville. Oh, yes, that is what it is. Okay, now I remember. Okay, so Stapleton is also a Baskerville. I think he's the son of the bad one that went out to South America.
Yes.
And died. When they make a point of telling us that he died unmarried and childless, well, not actually, because he's got this also deranged son named who runs in the family. Because again, that's a thing that people thought at the time, as we discussed last week. He is getting into the minds of his relatives, his cousins and uncles and whatnot, to bump them off so that he will now be the sole inheritor of Baskerville Hall. That's what it is. So, and Sherlock Holmes, using his amazing powers of deduction, and it's so much fun, when because the thing about Sherlock Holmes is he's so smart, he catches on to everything, but when he reveals, similar to in an Agatha Christie with a Miss Marple or a Poirot, when he reveals the plot, he is brilliant and he knows things that we don't know. But when he actually lays out the plot as he's put it together, you, the reader, can go, oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't realize it was that. And oh, da-da-da. And Holmes will sprinkle in like extra Holmes stuff that he knows because he's so smart and he has such a memory bank of facts and things about South America or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But for the reader, when you think about it, you go, oh, yes, of course. And therefore, it bears rereading and retelling. Just like, again, with Agatha Christie, when you are going to reinterpret this story for the screen or the stage, you have lots of points along the way in the story where you can dial it this way versus that way. And therefore, reinvent the story in a new, fresh way for a new audience or the same audience. Somebody who loves this book or had read the serial in the magazine, when the very first adaptations of it came to the screen, would have delighted in it because there's unexpected things every time it's reinterpreted. Again, very similar to Agatha Christie. So, did I forget anything?
The dog, it's a dog. It's like a wolf dog. It's like it's as big as a Great Dane. It's a gigantic dog, and they
quite
paint
a large dog,
and it's painted with phosphorus to look dangerous,
to look glowy and scary.
And it's also just a mean dog, and so that's the Hound of the Baskervilles. And we should say that it is called in the original version. It's called the Hound of the Baskervilles. In the adaptation we're talking about today, it's called the Hounds of Baskerville. So it's something else. They're flipping it a little bit, but that's the whole mystery, and it is fun to watch. And to, like Margos says, there's all these clues and there's all these places that it goes and twists and turns, and it's just fun. If you love a mystery, like this is totally.
It's a lot happens. Again, if you're reading it in the 21st century, or in the 20th century, even as we did, things seem to be happening very quickly. That's not necessarily how it would have been for the original readers of the story. Even so, very exciting.
I liked it very
and
much.
So much fun.
Yeah.
Like there's the whole thing, and he goes on about it quite a bit, about the lone figure on the tour on the moor. Watson, I think, sees this solid. Holmes has supposedly gone back to London, and Watson is out. He's doing reconnaissance there as he's been assigned, and he sees this lone, dramatic-looking figure standing on the tour, which is an outcropping of rock in that part of England. And there's this great descriptive, passage about this figure on the tour on the moor and overlooking the moor, and then we learn later that figure was Sherlock Holmes because he didn't actually go to London, But it's such an iconic image of that story. I love the way Conan Doyle does that. Like at certain points, even though a lot is happening and it's very rollicking and there's so many characters and so many little clues being dropped right, left, and center. He nevertheless, he will slow down every now and again and really describe Baskerville Hall, or really describe the moor, or really describe that figure standing there on the outcropping. And it just is, it helps you, the reader, to just totally immerse yourself in that world, and you can just see it, even if you've never been to the movies, it's like you are, because you can just visualize it so well with the way that he's described it. He's just super good at that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of based on him. I think there's a bit of that. Like we said, he was a doctor. He was very intelligent. He had a lot of different interests, including the supernatural, and it would make sense that he could put something like this together.
Many interpretations of this story, as we've said. There are many. There are radio versions. There's been stage versions. There's been multiple film and television iterations of this. And we're going to talk about one of the more recent ones, as we said before, 21st century Holmes in the series Sherlock.
All right, so let's play the trailer.
Is there a trailer?
Yes, there is.
There's a place, it's a sort of local landmark called Dewars Hollow. It got him, tore him apart. My dad's body was never found.
In your own time, but quite quickly.
He said he'd seen terrible things.
If there is a monster out there, John, there's only one thing to do: find out where it lives.
How far down does that lift go?
Quite a way, sir.
Henry's right. What a hound.
There is nothing wrong with me, do you understand?
because it would have been like next time on
Yes.
Sherlock.
This is season 2, episode 2. It's written by Mark Gatiss, directed by Paul McGuigan. It has Russell Tovey as Henry Knight. We have the basics. Of course, I should say Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock Holmes is just incredible. Martin Freeman as John Watson.
They're amazing. It's such a great pairing. The whole thing is so good. I just love this series so much. This was one, like, when it came out, Todd and I we would wait for it to, it aired like weekly here in the US.
I think on PBS.
Probably on PBS.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we would just, it was appointment television. We would always watch it. And of this whole series, this is definitely one of my favorite episodes, The Hound of the Baskervilles, and the way that they did it. And there are so many Easter eggs in this, in this adaptation.
Yes.
So many. It is such a delight. I mean, it's so fun to watch over and over and over and over again. Just to reiterate, in terms of the canon of the original source material, for readers, for the other thing about the original reading experience, these readers are reading this beloved character. It's a great story. It's very exciting, but it's also a character that they thought was dead. Sherlock Holmes had been killed off. Conan Doyle was like, I am so done with this guy. I can imagine, I really can't. Y'all have squeezed the last Holmes story out of me that you're going to get. How about this? He goes over the falls with Moriarty. And no, lo and behold, they demand it and demand it and demand it. And here is this great story. So he has to really give us like peak Holmes is what I'm saying. This story is.
How on earth did you notice all that?
It's not important. Punched out holes through your ticket's been
Not
checked.
now, Sherlock.
Oh, please. I've been cooped up in here for ages.
You're just showing off.
Of course, I am a show-off. That's what we do. Tray napkin used to mop up the spilled coffee. Strength of the stain shows that you didn't take milk. The traces of ketchup on it and around your lips and on your sleeve. Cooked breakfast. The nearest thing those trains can manage, probably a sandwich.
How did you know it was disappointing?
Is there any other type of breakfast on a train?
There's that is not the sequence of events in this series. Gaddis and Moffat kind of mix up the sequence. So really, if we were following along with the literary series, this episode would have happened way later on, even though it's sort of like a prequel. He wrote it as kind of a prequel to the previous story. Therefore, to me, it makes perfect sense to put it earlier on in the series. But but what they've set it up is that it comes at a point where Sherlock Holmes is getting to be very well known as a private detective. In the original series, Dr. Watson, in every adaptation, Dr. Watson is the reason that Sherlock Holmes is so well known. Dr. Watson in the original series is writing stories about their exploits that get published in magazines, just like we're reading at the time. Of course, now it's the 21st century and it's the early 21st century. So he's got a blog. Like we did.
Like we all did.
Like we all did. So he's got a blog and a website through which people can contact him to hire him for cases. And so we've got Dr. Watson now. So he's famous through Dr. Watson's blog. By the time we've gotten to this episode, they have met, they have partnered up, they have solved some big cases. They have worked with the police through Lestrade, who I love. I love. Just the cast is so good in this. And Sherlock Holmes, when this story opens, we've established people are starting to recognize and people are starting to know him. He's becoming famous as a solver of difficult cases. He's not delighted about that because he's not about that for him. It's always about the game and the puzzle of it because he's Sherlock Holmes. 221B Baker Street. They are living there in this beautifully decrepit Victorian. I know.
It's so
with
great.
The wallpaper and everything.
The wallpaper, stacks of books everywhere. The laptop is just like casually.
The dust.
The dust. I would be sneezing nonstop. He shows up and he's grouchy because he's trying to quit smoking. So Sherlock is yelling at everybody. The problem is he doesn't have a case. He needs like a really good case to work on, to sink his teeth into, so to speak.
Yeah. And in the original material, Sherlock Holmes, he likes a bit of the cocaine.
Yes, well, that was
Because he has a very active mind, and when he's not, it doesn't have a puzzle and a case to work on. It kind of goes a little squirrely. So therefore, he has to have the cocaine in the story. He has to have the cocaine to kind of keep his mind agile. Is his theory. I can't say that it's proven to work itself out that way.
no.
Over time. History has shown us, but that's something that would have been very exotic and accessible for nearly everybody reading it at the time. It was something they probably were hearing about for the first time.
A man comes in, a young man, and he's talking about when he was. What we're shown is that when he was a child, his father was murdered, and he witnessed his father being murdered by a hound, by a big wolf dog or whatever.
I can't remember if he's recently moved back there. Mm-hmm. So he's from a place called, I forget what the name of the village is, but it's Dartmoor, you know. And Baskerville, in this case, is not the ancestral home. It is a government facility.
Right.
Where, you know, similar to our Area 51. We're like, what is going on in there? Nobody seems to know. And the government is very hush-hush about it. And there's a lot of keep out at all costs. You will be shot on sight kind of signs. But anyway, this young man, Henry, you know, similar to in our original story, he has inherited, or he's moved back into his family home. He is wealthy, and he's starting to have flashbacks. He's starting to have he's now, as an adult, he's starting to have his life be interfered by these traumatic flashbacks, and he has access to a lot of things. So he is a therapist. You know, he's not tried. You know, he's not going first like, I know what I'll do. I'll call Sherlock Holmes. He's tried all the things, and it's not getting any better. And he's remembering things about this awful crime that happened, you know, at least 20 years before, to the point where these flashbacks are really interrupting his life. You know, and he's an adult, and he's thinking like, a dog, like a big dog, really? That seems weird. That doesn't make any sense. You know, that's not logical. I need to find out what happened so I can get on with my life, basically. And he's tried all the things. He has a therapist. Yeah, it's getting to the point where he's waking up in the middle of the night, and he's on the moor where his father was killed. He doesn't know how he got there. You know, all kinds of scary things are starting to happen. He's starting to lose track of himself and time. So he goes to Sherlock Holmes. He finds, you know, through the website, through the blog, he finds out about him, and shows up very agitated. And Sherlock Holmes is like, and I love the whole like side story about the bunny. He's so desperate for a case that he's considering something that was submitted by a little girl to the website about her missing bunny, Bluebell.
I love it when he's looking at him, and he's like, you know, the egg on his face and the all these clues on him.
Clues.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, you had an egg sandwich on the train, and it was terrible. Like, how do you know that? Because it's always bad, you know, basically. Yeah, it's never as good as you want it to be. You're just eating because you're starving. But he's deducing from him, and he does seem agitated. He does seem like he's frightened about what's going on. Yeah,
we established that Sherlock is desperate for a case. This might not be a case he would ordinarily take. And Watson is acting as if like, yeah, why are you even like talking to this guy? Hound. Okay. But something about it, you know, one, he's desperate for a case, but also something about it kind of tickles his imagination. So he decides, yeah, okay. All right. And that's similar to how it is in the book as well. So they go to Dartmoor. Again, it is picturesque. We are out of London. We are in the countryside. It is beautiful. Henry's house is equally decrepit. You know, he's a single young man, heterosexual, presumably. I'm guessing by the state of his house. He's not, you know, he's not doing well. He's not sleeping well. His state of mind is not good. And he's rattling around in this big house all by himself. And he's in the place where he grew up, where he has a lot of bad memories. But he's also among the people that he grew up with. And so straight away, Holmes wants to investigate this Baskerville facility. And Holmes has, it's not mentioned in the original story of Baskervilles, but it is in the Holmes canon, that Holmes has this brother, this older brother named Mycroft, who is maybe even smarter, but certainly more connected. He works for the government, but we don't know in quite what capacity, but he is somebody who can pretty much find out anything about anyone and can make all kinds of international things happen with a tap of his phone. So Sherlock has purloined his brother's magical government access key and uses it to gain them entry into this super, super, super high security facility. And he's smart. He knows, like, it's only a matter of time before I'm going to swipe this card at one of these doors and it's going to deny us. So we better hurry up and look into as much as we can look into, get our eyeballs on as many things as we possibly can until that happens. So they tour this facility. There's labs. There's a lot of like weird animal experiments going on. There's the whole thing about Bluebell comes back up with Bluebell the bunny. And sure enough, like eventually Mycroft is like, what are you doing? Get out of there. He gets wind that Holmes and Watson are in this facility and he yoinks back his security privilege and they're about to get into real serious trouble. And this man who works there swoops in and he says, oh, no, I know exactly who this man is. He's Mycroft Holmes. We've met. Mr. Holmes, good to see you again. And I'll escort them out. And he walks them out. He gets them out of this jam that they're about to be in, this very, very serious government jam. As they leave, he says, oh my gosh, Sherlock Holmes, what are you doing here? I got to know, why are you here? What's this about? Oh, Dr. Watson, I've been reading your blog. It's amazing. And it's so glad you're here. Like, oh, you must be here about Henry and the dog thing, right? It's about that. And he's extremely fanboying.
Yes.
Over these two to a suspicious degree, I think we can say. Gives him the phone number and he's like, oh, if you got, I know the family. The dad was one of my best friends. It was just so sad when he was ripped apart by that hound. Nasty business. And here's my number. And they're like, okay, great. Yeah. See you later. Thanks for the escape, stupid. Let's go. So they've learned a few things. There's definitely some suspicious stuff on at Baskerville. Don't know what the connection is, so now they're investigating the village, and that's a whole bit of fun as well. Like all the village, there's a young man who leads Hound, because it's a local legend about this hound, right? So there's this young man, he leads tours for tourists, visiting the spots where the hound has been sighted and spreading the myth and legend of the hound. And then there's this these two men who run the inn that everybody just assumes that Sherlock and Watson are gay. And frankly, everything they do, if you were only meeting them from the outside, from the other people's point of view, I would also assume that they seem very much like a couple. They bicker. They know each other very well. They obviously have deep feelings for each other, Anyway, they're staying at this inn and there's something going on with the couple, these two men who run the inn. They're also acting a little weird. Sherlock easily tricks the young tourist guide into telling him what he knows about this supposed hound. And he's like, oh yeah, I had a friend who had a friend of a friend of a friend who worked at Baskerville. And the things he said he saw, like, you won't believe it. Dogs the size of horses. And like, oh, okay, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember watching this first time, and at that point I was like, really? Now, also, I've also read the story, and I know that there's not really a supernatural hound, so there's that.
Right.
But dogs the size of horses, to what end? Like, why are we breeding dogs the size of horses? Is always my first question. Like, what are we doing with them? Is it for warfare? Who's feeding these dogs? Who's training them? Who's their vet? Like, what's with the dogs?
When I lived in Pennsylvania when I was a kid, We lived near SmithKline. And it was, this is the 80s. It didn't, and all the things that the kids talked about that happened at SmithKline, because it was also like locked down in the middle of like the country, basically. It was like in this pasture, and all the kids would talk about the animal experiments, and people, like everyone was just convinced aliens were in there. I mean, but these things get passed around and they start to kind of seem normal. Like, you know, yeah, you don't objectively question it. You're like, okay, sure. Dog horses. Okay.
Sure. Okay. So, and it throughout, as we said earlier, like there's so many fun little elements from the story, like all the character names, every single character in the original story shows up, or somebody has that name in this story in one way or another. Stapleton, Franklin, Mortimer, Barrymore, it's all there. It's all there. We get more than once the iconic shot of Sherlock Holmes on the tour on the moor. It's amazing. And it just like lingers there and sits there. So we can all like, you remember from the story? Remember how he's standing on the moor? And it's so much fun. It's so fun.
I could watch this again.
I adore it. I love, I guess, again, I especially love this episode. This episode, well, the series on the whole, one of the things that's so brilliant about it is that it does have these very nice moments of comedy. The running gag about them being a couple. There's all kinds of things like that come up. There's a lot of joking between Holmes and Watson and Lestrade, who does show up in this story. They're teasing him because he's just he's gotten super tan, which he genuinely was. Actually, he had genuinely come back from vacation, and they were like, "You are way too tan." So they had to write it into the script. He is like extremely tan. Like he takes a tan, I guess, that guy. I mean, it's just delightful. The whole thing with Stapleton and Bluebell, the bunny. There's a lot of like 80s references because the plot, you know, the ultimate plot has to do with some experiments that happened in the 1980s.
We should say that right away, Sherlock Holmes thinks the word hound is an acronym. Excuse me.
It's weird. Yes. Why are you using that word?
Why that particular
word? Because people don't say that.
Right.
You would say dog.
And they both at one point think that they see a hound and are genuinely terrified by it. Watson and Holmes.
So Holmes, Watson, and Henry, the young man who's come to them for help, they're like, Henry, take us to the place where you saw the dog, basically. They are standing there in the moor, and Holmes and Henry see the dog, but Watson does not.
Sherlock. Met a friend of yours?
What?
Dr. Franklin.
Oh, right. Bob, yeah.
Seems pretty concerned about you.
He's a worrier, bless him. He's been very kind to me since I came back.
Knew your father?
Yeah.
But he works at Baskervilles. Didn't your dad have a problem with that?
Well, mates are mates, aren't they? I mean, look at you and John.
What about us?
Well, I mean, he's a pretty straightforward bloke, and you... Well, they agreed never to talk about work, Uncle Bob and my dad. Dewars Hollow.
Sherlock.
Did you see it? Did you hear that? We saw it. We saw it.
No, I didn't see anything.
What are you talking about?
I didn't see anything.
Right.
And this really freaks Sherlock Holmes out. Why did I see a dog and you didn't? And I know that I saw a dog, and yet I know I couldn't possibly have seen a dog. You know, not the kind of dog that I saw. It doesn't make any sense for me to have seen a glowing, red-eyed, giant dog the size of a horse. Doesn't make any sense because he's logical. Like, I saw a dog, but I couldn't possibly have seen a dog. What is going on? So, yeah, you see... And Holmes is always playing everybody. Another running gag is he frequently throws Watson under the bus and tries out his theories on Watson. And this is one of the best, most
amazing
fun, cases where he does it. It is so much fun. I remember the first time I watched it. You see the scene where Watson. So they break into the facility. It turns out, spoiler alert, it turns out this time it's partly the phosphorescence, but it's also there's also a chemical weapon in the 80s that this guy is obsessed with. It was called Project Hound. And we'll get to why in a second. So Holmes is testing out whether this is actually what has happened. And so what does he do? He doses Watson. And Watson is in this lab, locked into this room, this empty room, with no other living thing in it. And he is convinced that he is now locked in the room with this crazy horse-sized hound with glowy eyes, so on. And it is so much fun.
It's in here with me.
Where are you?
Get me out, Sherlock. You've got to get me out. The big lamp, the first lamp that we saw. Oh.
John? John?
Now, Sherlock. Please.
All right, I'll find you. Keep talking.
I can't. They'll hear me.
Keep talking. What are you seeing? John?
Yes, I'm here.
What can you see?
I don't know, but I can hear it, though. Did you hear that?
Stay calm. Stay calm. Can you see it? Can you see it?
No, I can't see it. It's here. It's here. Are you all right, John?
It was the Hound. Sherlock, it was here. I swear it's Sherlock. It must... But did you see it? You must have.
It's all right. It's okay now.
No, it's not! It's not okay! I saw it. I was wrong.
Well, let's not jump to conclusions.
What?
What did you see?
I told you I saw the Hound.
Huge red eyes?
Yes.
Glowing?
Yeah.
No.
What?
Made up the bit about glowing. You saw what you expected to see because I told you. You have been drugged. We have all been drugged.
Drugged?
Can you walk?
Of course I want to walk.
Come on, then. It's time to lay this ghost.
It is so hilarious. But I remember when it first aired, and the first you see Watson, and he's scared, and you see these shadows of, you see these shadows of something large that is running back and forth, and I was scared.
Yeah.
The first time I saw this, I was scared. And then later on, you see the actual footage of what was actually happening, and it is hilarious. It's such a great reinterpretation of this story that has had many interpretations at this point. It's a great update. It's totally plausible.
It is. Yeah, so it's basically it's this it's a hallucinatory weapon that they're using on people. And so it turns out when he was a child, his father wasn't killed by that. He was killed by Franklin. That's who his father was murdered. And
He was killed by his best friend.
right, and he couldn't process
Franklin,
that.
the guy who was like Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson.
Right.
That guy.
The guy, exactly.
The
That
fanboy.
turns out to be turns out to be he's a psychotic, and he killed and he was wearing a gas mask, so he didn't get sick from it. But the little kid saw it, and in his little mind, he couldn't process it at all, like what was happening. So instead, he thought it was a hound, because that's the legend that's been going on in that village forever. And he was almost going to die by suicide. He's so distraught.
Because he's so distraught, and he, to the point, part of the thing we learn about this chemical weapon, one, it's aerosol. So the mists of the moor, it's easy to hide it in that mist that already exists there. Just kind of spray it in there, and then people breathe it in, and they can see whatever you tell them. They're highly suggestible. When he was a boy and he sees his father being murdered by his best friend, the dad's best friend, the best friend says to him, like, was a big dog. The dog had red eyes. Da, 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 da. And because the little boy has ingested this aerosol, he believes it.
Mm-hmm.
Another side effect of this aerosol, we learn, is that people become increasingly paranoid to the point that they themselves become homicidal. So poor Henry, who is getting slowly dosed with this stuff, and he's not sleeping, and he's seeing things that and he's smart, he's seeing things that, just like with Holmes, he's like, that can't possibly be what I'm seeing. And yet there it is. Things are triggering for him, and he's hallucinating. He's hallucinating that he's in the moor and he's in his own house. He's hallucinating that the hound is chasing him. And so he grabs a gun. He does, he's in his own house, but he thinks he's outside, and he shoots at what he thinks is the hound. And when the gun goes off, he's shot at his therapist, who has come by to help him. He's missed her, fortunately, but only just. And he realizes, like, oh my gosh, I am broken, and I'm dangerous to good people. And so I can't be around people anymore. And so he's gotten to that point. And so he goes out to the moor, and he's going to end his life to save the people in his life from the danger that he perceives himself to be. It's so sad, that he gets to that point. Unfortunately, Holmes and Watson are there to stop him. That's the big reveal of what actually happened. And there, Franklin is there. And we forgot to say, at the end of the original story, they chase the murderer, who I think is Stapleton in the story. They're chasing him, and the murderer is, because he's so desperate to get away, he runs into like a bog, like quicksand, almost like this thing, and it just sucks him under, and he drowns in the mud. Nobody shoots him or anything. He just in his running away, he is not paying attention, and the moor takes him. In this version, they're chasing Franklin, because there is a dog. Again, we cannot stress that there is an actual dog.
Right.
The innkeepers, turns out, the innkeepers have been keeping a rather large dog for the tourism. Woo! They're fun. And so they shoot the dog. Sorry, but they shoot this dog, and they're and Franklin in the shuffle, Franklin starts to run away, and they're chasing Franklin, and Franklin is running toward Baskerville, and he steps on a landmine around this facility, because it said there, we've seen signs the whole time that there are landmines all over the facility. He steps on one and is blown to smithereens.
Right.
And that's the end. And Henry is okay. Henry is still going to need a lot of therapy. And he might possibly need another therapist after having shot at his first one. But he's going to be okay. And we also solved the mystery of Bluebell the bunny in the mix while we're at it. Delightful.
It is. And in the closing part, did you see, like, they have Jim Moriarty is going to be released?
Okay, so if you follow the series, Andrew Scott plays Moriarty. He is the stuff of nightmares. Seriously. It's so scary. The hot priest from Fleabag is the scariest villain. Oh my gosh, is he frightening? And I can't remember if we've met him at this point. There's teasers. There's a lot of teasers before we actually have an episode where he's really directly involved. We see him, Andrew Scott, and he's in a cell. You know, he might even be in a straitjacket. He's in some kind of holding facility. And we hear Mycroft's voice, Sherlock's brother, say, "No, let him go."
Yeah. And he's written Sherlock's name all over the wall. It's bananas.
Like
It's 90 minutes. It goes by really fast. It's the
so
character
good.
actors here. Like everyone is so good. It's so.
We have Eunice Stubbs as Mrs. Hudson. Love. I could watch it again and again and again.
Yeah.
I just love it so much. It's so much fun. The locations alone. It's one of the things that I love about this book and this movie, and all the versions of the movie is that, you know, we're taken out of London. Mm-hmm. Sherlock is so identified with London. He knows every square centimeter, every molecule of grime in Victorian London. And he's in a completely new environment that we get to explore with him and Watson. And this really captures that so well. And just like with Death on the Nile, if you've read the book and you love the story and you know it backwards and forwards, you're still going to really enjoy this adaptation, and it's going to keep you guessing.
Yeah.
Which is the best thing.
And
so much fun.
And they're all really good. I mean, I really love this series, and they're easily available and bingeable, I would think.
So book versus movie.
I'm going to pick the movie.
What do you think?
Movie.
I know.
I don't want to read this again. I mean, it was fun, but I had a very hard time keeping up with it. Whereas when I was watching it,
it's much easier, right? I know.
I love Cumberbatch,
and I love
Sherlock.
the humor.
Yes, the modern.
Yeah, the writing
modern
is
take.
so smart and funny. Yeah,
And all the actors are really good.
Everybody's amazing. Everybody's fantastic. It's it's perfect. I love it, and the whole series is so good. But this might be my favorite one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we are.
There we are.
Mysteries in May. We did it.
We did do it, Margot.
What are we doing next?
Well, it is Pride Month, so we have a couple ideas for Pride Month, but we might need extra time. I'm waiting for a couple of books to come in. And I want to know how you feel about this, because I was listening to F This Movie, and Adam Risky was talking about Meryl Streep and Clint Eastwood in The Bridges of Madison County. I know. The book, but it's only like 200 pages. The movie is really good and different.
Okay.
And I just thought, I never read it.
I don't think
I've seen the movie several times.
I remember everybody was flipping out about this book.
Yeah.
And I remember that I went and I got it, and I got like 1 or 2 chapters in, and I was like, ugh, I'm not finishing this. So, I mean, but that was a long time ago.
We've had that happen.
I'm at a different place in my life.
Right. Same.
Okay. And so because of that, I never went and saw the movie. I've never seen the movie, and I only started the book.
It's easy to get. It's streaming. It's easy to get the book, and I think you're going to be surprised. And it's Eastwood. Like sometimes they're great, and sometimes, he's Mr. One Take.
He's a sex party mix of
and
entertainment.
I think that could be a fun discussion as well. And awesome. And so please, all those places I mentioned at the top of the show, we have a couple of ideas for Pride Month, but also we got the rest of the summer too. We got to fill up the show, and then we have banned books in September, scary books in October. I mean, almost half the year's gone by, kids. But thank you so much for all your suggestions. Like I said, at the top of the show, send us all those places I mentioned. Please send us your suggestions. Email once again is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all my social media callouts are at She's Not Your Mama. And where can they find you?
You can find me at Brooklyn Margot for TikTok, where I have some clips there from Sherlock, and also on Twitter, and then on Instagram and Threads, I'm at Brooklyn Fitchick, and that is also the name of my site. Okay, everybody, Mysteries in May is over. The mystery was solved. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We're a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You could find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. You could find us on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Book versus a Movie. Just spelled it all out. We have a Patreon page. Type in there Book vs. Movie Podcast, where you can find 8 years worth of shows. You can follow Margot D on social media at Brooklyn Margot and also Brooklyn Fitchick. You can find Margot P at She's Not Your Mama. Thank you again for listening, and please be sure to send along your suggestions for the show. Remember, the book needs to be easy to get your hands on, and the movie has to be streaming on a major platform. We will be back soon with a new episode.